My name is Avery. I was the last slave left unsold in a marketplace that reeked of cruelty, desperation, and shattered dreams. For days, I had sat chained and abandoned beneath a relentless sun that burned the cracked earth beneath my feet. The air was thick with dust and the stale stench of sweat, decay, and despair. Around me, the once bustling crowd had all but disappeared, sold off, traded away like broken toys, each leaving me behind, the one they called useless, broken, unwanted. The shackles on my wrists were cold and biting, cutting into raw skin, but it was the weight in my chest that hurt the most, the crushing certainty that I was alone. Not a single soul wanted me. The traders passed me by with scornful glances, muttering cruel insults under their breath. I was the last piece left on the table no one dared to claim. I lowered my head and closed my eyes, trying to hold on to whatever remnants of hope flickered inside me. But hope was a fragile thing, especially for someone like me. A girl with scars that told stories of battles lost and survival barely clinging to life. The marketplace had been my prison for what felt like an eternity, every day a reminder of my captivity and my worthlessness. The sun began to dip behind the jagged ruins that surrounded the ruined city, painting the sky in violent hues of purple and blood red. Shadows lengthened, creeping over the dusty stones like dark fingers ready to snatch away the last light. A heavy silence settled over the empty stalls, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind and the distant cry of scavengers. I was barely holding myself upright when I heard it, a whisper, soft and clear, yet cutting through the stillness like a sharp blade. "Come with me." The voice was unfamiliar but not threatening. It was gentle, almost coaxing. My heart skipped a beat as I lifted my head, eyes narrowing against the dimming light. Standing a few feet away was a man, tall and strong, his silhouette outlined against the fading sun. His clothes were rough but clean, and his eyes held a calmness I had never seen before. A kindness, a warmth that reached into the depths of my frozen soul. His gaze locked onto mine, unwavering and patient. "Come with me," he repeated, stepping closer. His voice was low but firm, carrying a promise I wasn't sure I dared believe. Fear and disbelief warred inside me. After all the years of pain, betrayal, and loneliness, could this be real? Could someone truly see me as a person rather than a possession? Could I dare to trust a stranger? The chains clanked as he pulled a small, jagged blade from his belt and expertly sliced through the cold iron binding my wrists. The sensation of freedom was overwhelming, a strange, dizzying feeling as the weight of years fell away from my arms. My fingers trembled as they flexed for the first time in what felt like forever. Louis, that was his name, he told me quietly, extended his hand toward me. His skin was rough from hard work, but his touch was steady and warm. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. "Don't look back," he whispered urgently. "They'll come for you." I swallowed hard, heart pounding wildly, and placed my hand in his. As he helped me to my feet, I realized that this moment, this choice to follow him, was the first step out of the darkness. We moved quickly through the crumbling ruins of the city, sticking to the shadows, avoiding patrols and scavengers alike. Louis said little, but his presence was reassuring, a shield against the nightmares lurking in every corner. With every step away from that marketplace of horrors, I shed another layer of fear. My mind raced with questions, but I dared not speak. Instead, I focused on the warmth of his hand, the steady beat of his heart, a lifeline to a future I hadn't dared to imagine. For the first time since I could remember, I dared to hope. The night cloaked us as we slipped through the ruins, shattered buildings and twisted metal shadows that felt like the skeleton of a world long dead. Every sound made my heart leap, the scrape of debris, distant footsteps, a low growl from unseen, creatures lurking in the darkness. Yet, amid all the fear, Louis remained a steadfast presence at my side. His hand never wavered in mine, his eyes scanning every corner for threats. I clung to that touch as if it were the last thread holding me tethered to sanity. I wanted to speak, to ask where we were going, who he was, why he had saved me. But the words caught in my throat. Years of silence and suppression made me hesitant, afraid that opening my mouth would unravel the fragile barrier I'd built around myself. Instead, I let my gaze fall to the ground, watching the shattered pavement as we moved forward. Lewis broke the silence after a while, his voice low and, "Careful. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Avery. You're safe now." The sound of my name from his lips was strange, like a lifeline cast across a chasm. I looked up to meet his gaze. There was no judgment there, no pity, just understanding. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. "Safe," I whispered, unsure if I believed the word. He gave a small, almost sad smile. "I know it's hard to believe, but I promise, I won't let anyone hurt you." I wanted to ask how he could be so sure. How could someone like him, a human unbound by chains, care for someone like me? But fear still gripped my throat. Years of betrayal taught me trust was a dangerous thing. Yet there was something different about Lewis. Something genuine. We reached the outskirts of the ruined city where the air felt less suffocating, the stars twinkling faintly overhead. "Here?" Louis slowed and finally let go of my hand. I felt an ache where his warmth had been. He looked around, eyes sharp and alert, then gestured toward a narrow path leading into dense woods. "This way," he said. As we moved into the forest's edge, a cool breeze brushed over my skin, carrying scents of pine and earth. Life, in stark contrast to the decay we had left behind. I breathed it in deeply, feeling a flicker of hope rise within me. Lewis finally spoke again, his voice softer. "Now, you're not just a slave, Avery. You're a person. You deserve freedom, and I intend to give it to you." The words struck me like thunder, shaking something deep inside. I wanted to believe them. I needed to. But the scars of the past were deep, and my heart was guarded. "Why me?" I asked, the question spilling out before I could stop it. He hesitated, then looked away, as if wrestling with memories he didn't want to share. "Because you reminded me of something I thought I'd lost," he said finally. "Hope, and the chance to fight for something real." For the first time, I saw the weight he carried, not just in his body hardened by battle, but in his soul. We were both broken, both searching for a reason to keep going. The forest around, us whispered secrets of ancient survival, and I realized this journey was more than escape. It was a beginning, a chance to reclaim a life stolen from me. As we walked deeper into the night, I allowed myself a single thought, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I could learn to trust again. The forest thickened around us, its tangled branches weaving a canopy that swallowed the pale moonlight. Each step we took was muffled by fallen leaves and broken twigs, nature's quiet symphony hiding us from prying eyes. Yet, despite the serenity of the woods, a storm brewed within me, a tempest of memories and fears I couldn't silence. I glanced at Louis. His face was set in determined lines, eyes sharp as a hawk's, scanning the dark. He was a man accustomed to danger, to hardship. But I wondered, what haunted his past? What scars did he hide beneath that steady exterior? My own past clawed at my mind, unbidden and relentless. The marketplace where I'd been sold and discarded, like refuse. The cruel hands that had torn at my dignity, the biting cold of neglect, the nights spent whispering prayers for an end to the pain. Every scar on my body was a testament to survival, but also a reminder of the life I'd lost. As we moved deeper, the silence between us stretched, thick with unspoken words. Finally, I broke it. "Why did you come for me?" My voice was barely more than a whisper, fragile as the night air. Louis paused, then exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the chill. "Because no one should be left behind like that," he said. "Because when I saw you, you weren't just another broken slave. There was something in your eyes, something fierce. You reminded me that even in the darkest places, strength can survive." I wanted to believe him, but years of abandonment told me otherwise. What if you're wrong? What if I'm just damaged goods? He stopped and turned to face me, his expression softening. "Everyone is broken, Avery. Some just hide it better. You're not alone anymore." For the first time since I was captured, I felt a crack in my armor. A sliver of warmth seeped through, but old fears are tenacious. The world outside was cruel, and I knew better than to trust easily. As if sensing my doubt, Louis continued, "There's a place not far from here. A sanctuary. People like us, those who've been cast aside, they find refuge there. It's not perfect, but it's a chance. A chance to heal, to be more than what we were forced to be." The promise of sanctuary sounded like a fairy tale. Yet, after years of darkness, even a flicker of light felt like salvation. We pressed on through the dense underbrush, the sounds of the forest comforting yet eerie. I wondered what awaited me beyond the shadows. Freedom? Or another prison disguised as hope? As we walked, a chill wind swept through the trees, carrying with it whispers of the past and the fragile promise of tomorrow. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time, I dared to believe I was more than the last slave left behind. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the dense canopy as we neared the sanctuary Louis had spoken of. The forest, once oppressive and foreboding, now seemed to breathe with a quiet promise. Birds began their morning songs, and shafts of sunlight pierced the morning mist, casting a gentle glow on the path ahead. Despite the peace around me, my heart hammered with a mix of hope and fear. What if this place wasn't what he said? What if it was just another cage, a trap disguised as freedom? Yet every step I took felt lighter, like I was shedding years of despair with each breath. Louis glanced over his shoulder, catching the flicker of uncertainty in my eyes. "It's close now," he whispered. "You're safe here." The path opened onto a small clearing, where a group of weathered but resolute figures moved about, a motley community of survivors. Tents and makeshift shelters blended with the surrounding trees, smoke curling from small cooking fires. Children's laughter mingled with the sounds of life being rebuilt, raw and imperfect, but real. I felt my breath catch. For the first time, I saw people, not as enemies or traitors, but as allies, as family. Faces etched with hardship, yes, but also kindness and resilience. They looked at me with curious eyes, some welcoming, others guarded, but none dismissive. Woman with silver-streaked hair approached us, her gaze sharp yet warm. "Louis," she said firmly, "you brought her back." "Yes," he replied. "Her name is Avery. She's one of us now." The woman smiled softly and extended her hand to me. "Welcome, Avery. You're safe here." Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from a swell of something I hadn't felt in years: belonging. Louis guided me deeper into the camp, introducing me to others who had found refuge here, survivors of similar horrors, each with their own story of pain and survival. In their eyes, I saw reflected my own struggles and the flicker of hope for a new life. That night, under a sky blanketed with stars, I lay on a bed of straw in a small tent. The chains were gone, but the weight of my past still pressed heavy on my chest. Yet as I listened to the soft breathing of those around me, I felt the first stirrings of peace. For the first time, I was not alone. Louis sat nearby, his silhouette framed by the flickering firelight. He caught my gaze and nodded once, a silent promise that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But for the first time, I was ready to fight. Not just to survive, but to live. Days passed in the sanctuary like a fragile dream slowly coming to life. For the first time since I could remember, I woke without the cold weight of chains pressing against my skin or the gnawing hunger in my belly. Lewis stayed by my side, patient and steady, guiding me through each new dawn as I tried to reclaim the pieces of myself that had been shattered long ago. The camp was a tapestry of broken souls stitched together by resilience. Each person carried scars, some visible, others buried deep beneath layers of silence. I watched as they helped each other, sharing food, offering quiet comfort, and laughing softly in the face of pain. I wanted to belong, to be part of something whole again, but my past was a shadow that clung tightly. Lewis saw it in my eyes, the hesitation, the fear of opening wounds too raw to bear. One evening, under the shelter of a battered tent, he sat beside me, voice low but filled with resolve. "Avery, healing isn't about forgetting what happened," he said. "It's about learning to live with it, to find strength beyond the pain." I wanted to believe him, but trust was fragile. The memories haunted me. The biting cold nights chained to the post, the cruel hands that tore at my spirit, the faces that looked through me as if I were invisible. How could I ever let go of that? Lewis reached out, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "You're not invisible to me," he said softly, "and you never will be." His words wrapped around my heart like a balm. Slowly, tentatively, I began to share my story, not in words but in silences, glances, and the tremors of my body. Louis listened without judgment, his presence a harbor in the storm. One day, I joined others in the camp to tend a small garden. The act of nurturing life from soil felt like a metaphor for my own healing, a slow, patient process of growth despite scars and storms. I planted seeds, watered the earth, and watched as green shoots broke through the dirt, fragile but determined. Indy. Those moments, surrounded by the quiet buzz of life, I realized that freedom was not just the absence of chains, but the presence of hope. Louis stood nearby, watching with a smile that reached his eyes. For the first time, I dared to imagine a future not defined by captivity, but by choice. Yet, even in this fragile peace, I knew the past still lurked beyond the sanctuary's borders, shadows waiting to reclaim what they thought was theirs. The sanctuary had become a fragile beacon of hope, a place where broken souls like mine could begin to piece themselves back together. But even the brightest light can cast the darkest shadows. I had only just begun to believe in this newfound freedom when the past came crashing back with a vengeance. It started with whispers, rumors drifting through the camp like a cold wind. Traders and slavers, they said, had caught wind of Lewis rescuing a slave from the ruins. They were coming for me. For Avery, the last slave who had slipped through their fingers. I tried to push the warnings aside, clinging to the peace I had fought so hard to find. But Louis was different. His eyes darkened with worry, and his protective stance grew more pronounced. "We can't stay here," he told me one evening, his voice low and urgent. "They'll send a force, and it won't just be slavers. There are hunters out there, mercenaries who track down runaways for sport." The thought sent chills down my spine. The sanctuary, our refuge, was about to become a battlefield. I looked at Louis, seeing the weight he bore for both of us. He was no longer just my rescuer. He was my protector, my shield against the coming storm. "We have to prepare," he said. "We'll fight. But if it becomes too dangerous, we'll have to leave and find somewhere safer." Fear twisted in, my gut, but beneath it, a fire ignited. I wasn't the broken girl left behind anymore. I had learned to fight, to survive, and now I had to prove it. The camp rallied quickly. Men and women sharpened blades, tended weapons, and fortified defenses with fierce determination. I trained alongside others, my body aching, but my spirit sharpening like steel. Night after night, I lay awake, haunted by memories of chains and cruelty, but also bolstered by the fierce will to protect this fragile new life. Louis never left my side, always watching, always ready. When I faltered, he reminded me of who I was becoming, not a victim, but a survivor, a warrior. As the first scouts of the slavers approached, their shadows creeping through the trees, I steadied my breath and gripped the hilt of my blade. This was no longer just about freedom. It was about fighting for the life I was finally beginning to claim. The night was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and damp earth as the slavers' scouts crept ever closer to our sanctuary. Every whispered footstep, every crack of a twig under booted feet, sent a ripple of alert through the camp. The fragile peace we'd built was about to be shattered. I stood alongside Louis, my hand steady on the hilt of my blade. The fear that had once ruled me was now tempered by something far fiercer, determination. I wasn't the broken slave chained in the marketplace anymore. I was Avery, a fighter, a survivor, and I would not go back. The first clash was brutal and swift. Shadows exploded into the clearing as mercenaries surged forward, weapons drawn, their faces twisted in cruel smiles. Our defenders met them head-on. Arrows hissed through the air, blades sang as they met steel, and the cries of battle echoed through the trees. I fought with every ounce of strength, muscles burning, heart pounding fiercely. Each swing of my blade was a declaration. I was free. Each parry and strike was a refusal to be enslaved again. Louis was at my side, a fierce protector and unwavering ally, his presence a steady anchor amid the chaos. At one point, I found myself face to face with a snarling slaver, his eyes wild with rage. The memory of my captivity surged through me, fueling a desperate strength. I dodged his strike, twisted, and sent my blade through his defenses. He crumpled, and for a moment, I tasted victory. But the battle was far from over. The slavers fought, with ruthless savagery, determined to reclaim what they saw as theirs. Our sanctuary was a battleground, the air thick with smoke and blood. Then, as dawn's first light broke through the trees, the tide began to turn. Reinforcements from nearby settlements arrived, their war cries ringing through the forest. The slavers, overwhelmed and disorganized, began to retreat. When the last of them fled, the camp erupted in exhausted cheers. We had defended our home. We had fought for freedom, and we had won. Exhausted and bruised, I sank to the ground beside Louis. He looked at me with pride and something deeper. A quiet acknowledgement of the battle we'd fought together, both, against enemies and against the darkness within ourselves. For the first time, I believed freedom wasn't just a dream. It was real. It was ours. The first rays of sunlight spilled gently over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the sanctuary. The air was crisp, filled with the quiet hum of life slowly stirring from the long, brutal night. The battle was over, but its echoes still lingered in aching muscles, torn clothing, and eyes heavy with fatigue. Yet amidst the exhaustion, a profound sense of victory and rebirth settled over us all. I sat quietly by the edge of the camp, my hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. The scars of the fight were etched deep in my body, but it was the scars within, the ones on my heart and soul, that I was learning to face now, in the fragile light of freedom. Louis was nearby, his presence steady and reassuring, watching over the camp with a quiet vigilance that had become a comfort more than a necessity. For so long, I had lived as a shadow, an invisible, unwanted thing whose life was measured only by chains and servitude. But now, here, surrounded by people who had fought and bled alongside me, I felt something I hadn't dared to imagine for years: belonging. The woman who had first welcomed me into this broken sanctuary approached, her silver hair catching the sunlight. She smiled gently and placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. "You've come far, Avery," she said, "more than many ever could." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It still feels unreal, like I'm waking from a nightmare. "That's the journey," Louis said softly, stepping beside me. "Freedom isn't just about breaking chains. It's about rebuilding yourself from the pieces left behind. And it takes time." I looked at him, grateful beyond words. He had pulled me from darkness, fought beside me when shadows threatened, to reclaim me, and stood by me as I struggled to find my own strength again. Louis wasn't just my rescuer. He was my partner in this new life. As the camp stirred to life, children laughing and the scent of cooking fires filling the air, I felt a stirring within, a quiet but persistent flame of hope and courage. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be days when the past clawed back with sharp reminders, when fear and doubt tried to reclaim their hold. But I was no longer alone. I had a place to belong, people who cared, and a chance to define my own destiny. Louis reached out, taking my hand in his. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Together, we'll build something stronger, a future worth fighting for." And for the first time in a lifetime, I believed it. The nightmare was over. The chains were broken. I was free and ready to live. With the sun rising high, casting warm light over the sanctuary, I stood and faced the world ahead with steady eyes and an unyielding heart. The last slave left behind had become a woman reborn,